It's time for another episode of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. I'm your host, Baxter Whitworth, and as always, joining me today is your other host, Paul Hayes. In this episode, we're going to continue talking with Mr. Mullinix, and we're going to talk about the benefits of continuing your education as a cattle producer, and we're also going to talk about K-State at Kansas State University. So let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast,
bringing you the innovative new ways of the cattle industry.
We're your hosts, Baxter Whitworth and Paul Hayes. Together, we're going to be interviewing leaders within the cattle industry.
Here on this podcast, our focus is honoring God and innovating the cattle industry. Get ready to listen, learn, and laugh as we help innovate the cattle industry.
Let's get innovating. Have you been looking for a place to buy top quality AI sire semen or collect a bull of your own? Well, look no further than Elgin Breeding Services. Located in Elgin, Texas, Elgin Breeding Service is not only one of the best breeding services in the business, but also has superior customer service. Contact them at ebsbull@elginbreedingservices.com or by phone at 512-285-2019. Again, that's 512-285-2019. And visit their website at elginbreedingservice.com. Okay, well, we're still in Manhattan, Kansas at K-State, and we're excited to get the interview started. We're going to start off with just talking about how continuing your education can help you as a cattle producer and how what the benefits of that are. So I guess let's just start with the basics of it. How can continuing your educations to get a bachelor's or even further help a rancher in their operation?
Baxter, it's good to be back again. And I think it's important to understand that education comes in a lot of forms. And we had talked about it in the previous podcast about how a big part of the learning process as an evaluator of cattle, as a breeder of cattle, happens, what I'd call through the school of hard knocks, so to speak, at home, working with your family and learning the ins and outs of your cattle business. But I think the opportunity to extend that in the form of a formal education has so many benefits potentially to a young person. And I look at it in two parts. First of all, regardless of which degree path you end up choosing, there are so many things to understand about the beef cattle industry as a whole that help you long term. Obviously, an animal science education is going to give you background in depth in the science of nutrition, reproduction, genetics. Regardless of what institution you're at, you're going to have core coursework that takes what you've learned at home and now helps you to understand the why behind it. And I think that's a big part of what my education was for me. It was these light bulb moments that all of a sudden said, holy cow, that's why we've been doing it that way at home. And it kind of brings things, together. But what it also does, I think, is opens your eyes to the things that you maybe haven't had the privilege of experiencing through your own operation. And that was, to me, a big part of my experience. What I hope we're giving students here at K-State is an opportunity to open your eyes to all the things that are available, the technologies that are available to help you in your breeding program. And when I was a student at Kansas State University, things like, estrus synchronization and embryo transfer were still in their infancy. And now today, things like seeders that didn't even exist when I was a student, are a big part of everyday production for most, seed stock ranches. So to me, that's a big part of what your education does, is help you to explore and to see the technologies and the opportunities that are out there that you can someday take back to your program. The last thing that I will tell you, and maybe the most important thing, is all the things that you get the opportunity to do at a college or university level outside the classroom that will extend your network and will bring people into your life like Paul, that will influence you for the rest of your life. They'll be the contacts that help you to improve the genetic base of your cow herd. They will be the contacts that you someday sell commercial bulls through, and
Or start
yes,
a podcast with.
or start a podcast with. Exactly. We're in the beef business, but it's a people business too. And it is those contacts, those networks that you develop that oftentimes start in college, that are going to make you a better, more successful producer when you get back into that, part of your life.
I like that. And something you said at the very beginning of that answer is that you're understanding the why. And I think that's important because the name of our podcast is Cattle Innovation Station. And so we want to look at stuff and say, well, is there a better way to do this? But first we need to understand why we do what we do in the first place. That way we don't change something that works really well and may have consequences from changing it. And so I think it's important to understand the why, and that's a great point you brought up.
That is an incredibly mature answer to understand that, and I don't know that I could have put it any better, Baxter. That was really good.
Yes, sir.
You talked about how getting like an animal science degree, it's gonna help you understand the science part of what we're doing. I'd like to just hear what you think about what degrees you would recommend for people that want to be ranchers.
Yeah. So again, I think there is probably 2 or 3 things that I think, might be important components to a degree path. And one of the things, and I can't speak to every single institution across the country, but what I can tell you about K-State is we have a really great understanding that every degree or every student is not destined to follow the same degree path. They may end up with the same piece of paper, but in that process, what we love is the opportunity to sit down with a student, learn what their long-term goals are, and then tailor make a curriculum that makes sense for them. And in that process, it's going to be a little different for each student, in what is going to generate the most value for them long term as they go back into what is their ultimate calling. But as I quickly sit here and talk about different coursework, I think of things that we've already mentioned on the animal science side of things, but then I also think about how important the understanding of business is. And ultimately, you're running a business, and understanding those concepts becomes really critical. I also think of things like range management and understanding proper pasture management. And, those are all things that can become a big part of a degree path here at K-State, and at many other institutions. We have a spectacular grain science program here that a lot of students take advantage of, who are going back into operations or family operations that might have some sort of a combination of both crop and livestock production. So again, I think a little depends on the student. A little depends on what their long-term goal is. And then how do we create a degree path that makes sense so that you lock down and are in courses that are going to benefit you across different discipline areas when you're in production.
That's right.
Have you been looking for Brahman cattle with a good genetic background? Contact 79 Cattle Company, selling reliable Brahman replacement heifers, Brahman show prospects, and Brahman bulls. Contact Taylor Tate at 210-241-4511. Again, that's 210-241-4511. Or contact Mallory Tate at 210-861-0155, 210-861-0155.
Absolutely. And then I'd like to touch on, you said range playing. That's also something that in our last interview, Dr. Clear mentioned. He said that in reality, we're all just grass farmers because that's one of the cheapest way to feed our cattle. And that it just sounds better to call ourselves ranchers.
Yeah, it's funny, and I think the world of that gentleman. We were talking about him before the podcast started, but yeah, we are we have a very unique creature that we raise, and it's one of the few animals in protein production that has the ability to convert grass to gain, and our ability to utilize that ability for a beef animal to forage is something that we have to be able to take advantage of, and that's it allows us to utilize ground and parts of this country that are not tillable, that are not capable of anything other than livestock, sustaining livestock production on them. But we also have to understand the sustainability component to that, and how do we take advantage of that beef animal utilizing that forage, but also how do we care for that ground in a fashion that it gives us the most production possible for as long as possible.
That's right.
Absolutely. Now that we talked about what degrees that you would recommend for farmers, I'd like to talk about the level of degree and whether you think it's a waste of time and money or a good investment for a student that wants to run a cattle operation to get maybe a master's.
Yeah.
Or somewhere there.
Sure. And again, one thing you got to understand is I tell students all the time, I advise a lot of students. While it is exciting to come to college with an idea of what you want to do for the rest of your life, plans change, and that's okay. And you're going to figure out things about yourself. You're going to figure out things about, your interest areas as you become a college student that you maybe never considered. And I'm a prime example of that. Never in a million years would you have convinced me that someday I was going to be in the world of academics doing what I'm doing when I was sitting in your guys' shoes. And, I guess when I left to go to school at K-State, I would have told you my plan was to go back to our family operation. And fortunately, I had mentors here that helped prepare me for exactly that. But along the way, they also exposed me to a lot of other things that I had never considered. And what it ultimately helped me to do was find what my true calling was. And, that's where I think about advanced degrees or other degrees. I would never consider them a waste of time, but I think it's certainly logical to think through the process and say, hey, if this is the job I want, an undergraduate degree is sufficient. If I want to go be, run a cow herd, but also have a full-time job as a nutritionist, consulting nutritionist, where I can work from home, does a master's degree in ruminant nutrition make a heck of a lot of sense? It very well might. So again, I think it's more about taking advantage of the opportunities that are there. I have some spectacular friends that are incredibly successful that all they do is ranch, some of which don't have a college degree, some of which have an undergraduate degree, some of which have a master's, and some of which have a PhD. And I don't think any of them would tell you they took the wrong path to get there. They took the right path for themselves. And I think that's what's important in this process, is finding the right path for yourself. Don't underestimate the value of where that advanced degree could pay dividends in your future. But also know that, I can be successful doing this a lot of different ways.
That's true.
Absolutely. And then we kind of just talked about students and how they're going to learn through college. But what about the people who have already gone through college? How do they continue to learn, stay up to date on new technologies, even after they graduated college and don't have that option anymore?
Paul, it's an awesome question. And what I love about the question is it, at its root, is an understanding that our industry changes. It is constantly changing. Not to belittle any degree path, but you know what? When it comes to mathematics, 1 + 1 = 2 500 years ago, 300 years ago, 100 years ago, and yesterday. And 1 + 1 will equal 2 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and 100 years from now. In our industry, we have constant change. And as a successful entrepreneur, businessman, cattle rancher, cattlewoman, whoever it is, you have to be willing to be a lifelong learner. The question is, how do I go about doing that? Well, I think there were a lot of brilliant people out there that knew this a long time ago. And one of the things we are really, really fortunate to have in the world of agriculture is a land grant mission at universities across the country that includes research and extension. And it is the extension service that continues to be a deliverer of information back to the everyday farmer and rancher. And they become such an incredible resource in your own community, is that local, regional extension professional. And they are the person that will disperse that information back to you. But also, as a breeder, especially in the seed stock world, I hope that our breeders are consistently taking advantage of what their breed associations or their, livestock associations in their state are offering, because there's so many educational opportunities that are out there to help you to continue expanding your knowledge base. And it's there for you to take advantage of. If you want to stay home and you want to ignore those new technologies and the opportunities of that, information being dispersed to you, then others are going to pass you by. So you've got to take advantage of that and be willing to be a lifelong learner to improve your production systems.
That's right. If you want to kind of understand more how extension works, again, I would refer you back to with our episodes with Dr. Clear. Those were great discussions on extension. But yes, sir. Thank you for that. That was. I also want to point out another way you can continue learning, and that's by listening to podcasts. I've heard of one, Cattle Innovation Station. You might want
to. You got it. You're nailing it.
I've heard it's pretty good.
If you truly want your livestock to perform at their best, make sure to contact Vance Aaron, the owner and operator of AFL Livestock Solutions. Vance specializes in magnawave treatments that use pulsed electromagnetic fields, or PEMF, to relieve pain, swelling, and inflammation, caused to help your livestock feel their best. In addition to livestock, Vance can also help you feel better. His treatment works great on sore muscles and joints, along with other mobility issues. His treatments are FDA approved to treat migraines. Aaron Family Livestock Solutions has helped many exhibitors make it to the backdrop with their proven MagnaWave treatments. Don't miss your next backdrop picture. Give Vance a call at 903-720-3184. Again, that's 903-720-3184. Or find them on Facebook at AFL Livestock Solutions.
All right. Well, I guess we discussed continuing education, and one way to continue education is to go into Kansas State University. So let's discuss that. So I guess let's talk about the history of Kansas State. Can you give us some of the history of it?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of mentioned it as part of the discussion of extension, but one of the unique historical pieces of Kansas State University is that shortly after the Morrill Act, Kansas State University became the first land-grant university in the United States. And even since K-State's inception, I think we have always historically and to this day remained so committed to that land grant mission. And there are so many great universities across the country. You guys have some in your home state, but I'm so proud to be part of the history of what K-State is, and I think it goes back to that. And along that process, I mentioned somebody like a Dr. Don Good, but I could put a list together, of the people that have impacted the beef cattle industry in particular. I think of a Dr. Miles McKee. I think of a Dr. Calvin Drake, Scott Shockey. The list. I think you interviewed Dr. Mosier, a year ago, and the role he has played in breed associations, and then we can go to outstanding alumni even, and the people that are impacting so many different breeds, and the beef and cattle industry as a whole. And what do I think they have in common are a lot of things that were emphasized in their education here at K-State. And what I love about our program and the history of our program is how we have stayed committed to the balance of science with a hands-on component. And we are so fortunate. You've seen it here in the last few days as part of our livestock judging camp, Baxter, but we are so fortunate to have our teaching units, our livestock animal teaching units, all within a mile of campus. Here today, we're sitting right next door to a construction project that is going to put a new teaching pavilion right in Weber Hall, where we bring livestock to the students. And I love that approach. And I've said this many times over the years. It's a big part of why I was drawn to K-State, years and years ago as a high school student trying to make my collegiate decision. And I could have told you when I was your guys' age, I'm a visual learner. You put something in front of me, you give me an opportunity to get my hands dirty, I can kind of figure it out. If you sit me in front of a professor with 300 other people in a lecture hall and you tell me about it, maybe. But when I see it, it makes sense. And that's the history of K-State. And that is something we've stayed committed to. And I'm not saying that there aren't other institutions that do that, but unfortunately, they are becoming fewer and further between. And sometimes no fault of their own. Many of these college towns grew into huge cities. And that's one of the things I love about K-State and its history is this is still a small town atmosphere. And because of it, we can have those livestock units right here on campus and give ourselves the opportunity to teach with it. The other thing I will tell you about the history of K-State is a personality that I think is second to none. And I think it revolves around the people. I come back to Dr. Good and the conviction that he had, the willingness he had to use a crossbred steer when everyone else thought it was just foolish. You know, I think about what had to go through his mind in that moment. And that was, you know, there had to be butterflies in his stomach. He knew he was making a decision that would be, you know, looked at by a portion of the industry as something that was quite foolish. And yet he believed in that decision and the impact it could have in the future of animal production. And so he did something unconventional. And what did it take? It took guts, I guess, but it also took strength in who he was. I think it took, you know, a belief in just doing what was right, no matter what other onlookers might think. And I think K-State, that's a big part of who we are and our history is, you know, those kind of people taking an active role and making an impact in the student in the student's life during their time here as an undergraduate in particular. So, you know, now to watch those students go out and impact the industry, you know, I think it has it really tells the story of what K-State is. So,
All right. Neat. I
Thank you for that.
love hearing the history of, you know, different colleges, especially when it revolves around agriculture.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing the history of K-State with us. But also, what can you tell us about the K-State College of Agriculture? You kind of did tell us a little bit through the history, but
I think we have the single most unique and well-rounded set of degree programs that you'll find anywhere in the country. We're lucky we are immersed right here in the center of the country in all of those industries. And I think that's a big reason why so many of our degree paths in the College of Ag are successful and produce great students, is whether your interest is in agronomy or your interest is in animal agriculture, maybe your interest is in the business side, horticulture, ag communications, you name it. We are in a part of the country that exposes our students to all of that at the highest of levels. You know, and I think that is the building block of what has made, you know, all of those programs in the College of Ag so successful. Today, our animal science program in particular continues to grow at an exponential level. And one of the things that's really unique across the College of Ag as a whole is how many of those students are now coming from out of state. When I came to K-State, I'll date myself, that was in the fall of 1992. I remember them telling us that 7% of the students here in the College of Ag and Animal Science were from out of state. And today we sit almost at 50-50. And, you know, it tells you where the demand across the country is. And I think it speaks highly to bring students not only from your own state, but from across the country. It speaks highly of the way we approach educating students. And like we mentioned earlier, I think a big part of that is the hands-on component and the extracurricular activities that our students can do and be a part of that complements their formal education while they're here.
I would definitely say that K-State has a national draw. Just being here at the livestock judging camp, I would say, before you said 50-50, I was going to say only about half the kids that were here, I would say, were from Kansas. It was pretty, you know, you have people from all over the country, and so I think it's cool, and you're right, it speaks well when you can pull people from out of state that are drawn to your agriculture department. So, going even deeper, and we've talked about being on campus and being flexible, and that's actually a part where I would like you to elaborate even more if you possibly can, because I think that's really cool about how you have a a flexible curriculum. So could you talk about some more of the benefits and go a little bit deeper on that of the animal science department, especially of K-State? Infinity Cattle Services, owned by Chris Shivers, is glad to be a sponsor of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. Infinity Cattle Services, a unique, vision-driven, service-oriented company committed to developing successful revenue-producing cattle operations, is a full-service consulting and marketing firm specializing in Brahman and Brahman-influenced cattle. Contact them today to learn more about how they can assist you with locating cattle, cattle mating, sale management, marketing, communications, record keeping, data submission, and a wide array of other services. They can be reached at 713-202-1747. Again, that's 713-202-1747, or at infinitycattleservices@gmail.com. That is infinitycattleservices@gmail.com. Visit their website at infinitycattle.com or check them out on Facebook and Instagram.
I think it's the single most important thing we do for students is allow them flexibility in their degree path. Now, that doesn't mean they don't take some of the same courses. And if you're going to seek an animal science degree at K-State, you're going to take principles of animal science. That would make sense. You're going to take a basic nutrition class. You're going to take genetics. You're going to take repro. There's going to be a core set of courses that are the building block for other things. But if you love beef cattle, we want you to follow that passion. If you learn that, man, I love repro, then we want you to follow that passion. You know, somebody else is going to love nutrition and horses. We want them to follow that passion. And what our degree path gives you the opportunity to do is, as you move further into that degree, to start specializing, to start really following a path that makes sense for you. And I've told people this a lot. You know, I was a good student, you know, when I was your age. I wasn't a 4.0 student, you know, but the best grades I ever got, I was a 4.0 student for a little while, and it was during my junior and senior year here at K-State. It wasn't because those classes started getting easier. In fact, they were some of the most difficult ones I ever took. But it was the part of your degree path that gets more and more specialized, and you have more and more say and flexibility in what you take. And all of a sudden I was taking all these classes that I couldn't wait to take, you know, and all of a sudden I was going home at night and I actually wanted to read the book, you know, not just because I wanted to do okay on the exam, but because it was something that really I had a passion for, you know. And we're so lucky to have a teaching faculty large enough in scope that we can offer a lot of classes, and you get a chance to pick and choose those. So I love it. I think that's what's great. I have students all the time that, you know, I'll advise, you know, students, you know, maybe 2 students that graduate with the same degree and maybe didn't even take a single class with one another in the last 2 years they were here. They get the same piece of paper, but one of them loved dairy cattle and the other one loved, you know, swine. One of them really had an interest in genetics while the other one had an interest in nutrition. And we helped them to find the classes that made sense for them.
That makes sense. And I think, you know, a lot of times the way just the education system can work sometimes, it just can send people off to be like all the exact same, and that's not what we need to be. We need to be, you know, everybody has a special, unique interest and ability, and I think catering to that is a great idea.
The cater is the perfect word. We, as educators, yes, we need to give you a certain core level, you know, of competency. But beyond that, we want to cater to what is going to make you successful someday.
Absolutely.
Well, through explaining the details about K-State, I'm sure you may have persuaded some of our listeners that are making their collegiate decision. And if they're listening to this, what's some advice you would want to say to them if they're considering K-State?
Come make a visit. That is the single biggest advice I would ever give any student. It changed my outlook on what I wanted to do when I was your guys' age, and I think it is the single most important thing that you need to do for yourself. And I'm not saying come visit K-State only. I'm saying go visit the 2 or 3 or 4 places that you have an interest in, and then let the dust settle and figure out what's right for you. This will be the biggest decision you will have made in your young adult life when you get to that point. And you owe it to yourself to go through that process the right way and figure out exactly the place that's going to give you an opportunity to have the most success. And it can't be a decision that you make because this friend is doing this or this person. No, it's be selfish for that moment. And I use that term and I follow it up by saying, be selfish because this is a huge life decision for you, and you need to pick what's right. And, but by far the single most important thing you can do, the best advice I can give you is go there, spend a day there, visit with the people that are going to be impactful, during your time at that institution. And, there's a lot of great universities. And I'm not going to sit here today and tell you that having a degree from Kansas State University, is X number more valuable than a degree from some other place. There's a lot of great universities. But what there also is a perfect university for you. And that's what you have to figure out, right? As a young person looking to make that decision, there's a lot of great opportunities. But I am so grateful that I found the one that was right for me, that changed my life, that put me gave me the opportunities to do what I was destined to do. So, that's what each of you guys owe to yourself. And I never would have known that had I not come out and made that visit. So make sure that you do that.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I'm yawning a little bit. I'm not bored by any means.
We worked you too hard at judging camp, didn't we?
Well, I wouldn't say too hard, but I'm not.
It is late nights. Yep.
Right now, so.
Well, these have been some great 3 episodes, and especially this last one talking about continuing education and talking about K-State. And I think it's about time we start wrapping them up with the questions we like to ask people. And I'd like to start off by asking really what I like to call the question of kind of our motto. And it's, what advice do you have ranchers to help them innovate their herd for the better?
I think we covered a little bit earlier, and that is just the simple thought of never being beyond learning something new. I think that is so critical if you want to be successful in life, not just as a rancher or as a cattle producer. In life, you have to be willing to learn from your successes, learn from your failures, and learn from others. It'll make you a better rancher, a better cattle person. It'll make you a better husband or wife. It'll make you a better parent. And ultimately, it'll make your life more fulfilling. So, continue to learn. I think that is the single biggest piece of advice that I would give anybody.
That seems to be the most common trend for the answer for that question.
Yeah.
And it's great. I love it.
It is.
It's
the most true.
Because it sums up everything
Absolutely.
that we talked about in the podcast, of everything that you might want to implement in your herd. Well, we have to learn to know what we want to implement into our herd. So
the other thing I would say along that line, and I'm going to try to phrase this in the perfect way, don't be afraid to be a calculated risk taker. I think just flying by the seat of your pants, can generate some issues in life. But if you've thought it through the right way, if you understand the decisions that you're going to make and what potential risk is there compared to the reward that you think is there, in this business, you can't be afraid when the timing is right to do those things. So I think that's an important thing that is scary in life sometimes. Taking on debt is scary sometimes. But sometimes it's the only real way to get to your end goal. So taking those calculated risks are something, that are important. And even to what you just asked me, making a college decision is a calculated risk, right? But if you go about it the right way, it's going to help you be successful.
That's right. And taking opportunities is so important, because if you don't take opportunities, eventually you're gonna leave no further than where you started.
Absolutely. And another question we like to ask people: what are some core values that you'd like to share with us and our listeners?
Honesty. That's one thing that I've learned over the years, even in judging livestock shows. It's there's a lot of things people want to hear, but the key to being successful in this is sometimes telling people what they don't want to hear. And being honest with them. My brother and I talk a lot about that. And he makes his living every day in the cattle business. And sometimes his days are filled with telling customers maybe things that they don't necessarily want to hear. But in the long term, having that honest approach has made him even more successful. And I think that's a core value that will always stand the test of time. It's not about what people want to hear. It's about what needs to be heard. And sometimes that's hard. But it's not that you're being mean. It's not, it's same thing when I'm out there with a microphone in my hand. It's not my job to belittle anybody. That's never what a goal of a judge is. But you put a lot of work into that project. And for you to not leave that ring with an understanding of why you stood fourth or fifth or sixth is a disservice to you. So I need to tell you what's right, and I need to tell you what needed to be changed. And being honest in all parts of your life will take you a long way. Also just to me, being a true, having a servant nature to you, and being there for other people is important. That's why I love education. But being willing and having a willingness to serve others is something that will benefit you tenfold, because I already see it. The things that my children get to do today, and the people that have been influential in their life, it's coming full circle. In many cases, it's people that were former students of mine, and now they feel like it's their way to give back by positively impacting my kids. And how awesome is that? So just a handful of things: truthfulness, and just having that servant nature, I think, are important core values that'll take you a long way.
That's good. We've said it a few times on our podcast, but what goes around comes around, and it may not be in the same way that you think, but it's. And another thing you brought up, and like you said, it's hard sometimes to hear critiques of your animals, but it's also very, very helpful. And so I think, knowing what you need to change is very important. So I guess our final question is, what's your favorite Bible verse?
I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, just because I think it's more about the message. But it's 1 Corinthians and um, it talks about running your race, and I love it because it's it speaks to me, because anybody that's been around me knows how competitive I am, and in anything that I do. Growing up as little kids, it started then, and I've told people before, I'm double bred competitive, because my mom and dad both are fiercely competitive, and but what I love about that verse is it says, "Run your race," and it tells you. I interpret it as, run your race to win, go for the crown, but do it in a fashion that the Lord will look positive upon, and that ultimately that'll give you the biggest crown. And how cool is that? That in a time, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with it, there's times where, in youth events or whatever, we want to give out participation trophies and proclaim no winners and no losers, and to some extent I understand a little bit of that. But everything you will do in life will have a competitive component to it. If you're going to be successful in life, you need to know how to compete. You need to know how to handle success, and you need to know how to handle failure. And sometimes we look at it as failure when it's ultimately the greatest teaching opportunities. But I love that there is a verse that tells us it's okay. It is okay to want to win. It is okay, to want that in your life, as long as you understand that there's a way to do it, and do it properly. So that's always been a favorite of mine, because I think it speaks to me and my personality, perhaps. So.
All right. Well, that's great, and I'm definitely enjoyed this. Is there anything else you wanted to say that maybe we didn't ask you? Sometimes people ask us questions. You have the floor. What do you want to say? Or
we've covered so much, Baxter, Paul. The thing I guess I would end with is, keep doing what you're doing, because I love the name of your podcast, but when I think of innovation, again, I think of, what does that mean? That means sometimes thinking outside the box, right? How old are you guys now?
We're both 14.
14.
Yes.
When did you start the
14.
podcast?
In June of last year.
A year ago.
So I would venture to say that a cattle industry podcast started by two 13-year-olds was outside the box.
Yes.
That was innovation. And we need leaders like you guys in the future of this industry, especially in the things that we've spent time talking about in these last couple podcasts. I love that you guys find the value of the competition of the show ring, but already you are marketing cattle and see and understand the commercial part of our industry as well. And not every young person, is privy to that experience like you guys are. That doesn't mean they're growing up in a bad experience if all they have is show livestock. But someday they're going to be your college teammates on a judging team, or someday they're going to be your, in an animal science class with you here at Kansas State University. And when that day comes, I hope that you help them see both sides. Because we need to continue to understand the value that comes with that. And hopefully we can quit that disconnect and maybe even shrink it, and bring it closer together again. So, I just applaud what you guys are doing. This is awesome. Keep it up. And sometime down the line, maybe we'll do this again.
Yes, sir. Sounds
All right.
good. I've definitely enjoyed it. I'm sure you,
Thank
Paul,
you.
Have you,
I have.
Thank you,
Thank you.
we've covered multiple topics, like you said, and if you haven't checked out all the episodes with Mr. Mullinix, I would suggest doing that, because they've been really good. So, thank you for joining us, Paul. Anything else we need to cover?
I don't think
Well,
so.
until next time, keep innovating the cattle industry. Signing off.
Hello, guys. Thank you for listening to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. We want to make this podcast better. So if you would, please like this episode and leave us feedback in the comment section. Something else that helps make this podcast better is when you respond to the polls. So if you're able, please respond to our polls. Help us make this podcast as good as possible. Thank you, God bless, and have a good day.
Thank you for listening to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
We're your hosts, Baxter Whitworth.
And Paul Hayes.
Remember our key verse, Proverbs 16:3.
Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans.
Thank you for listening.